Hey everyone, ready to dig into a case that had everyone glued to their TVs back in the day?
Oh yeah, this one is a wild ride.
We're talking about the Menendez brothers.
Beverly Hills, a shocking crime, a trial that captivated the nation. Definitely one for the books.
We're going deeper than the headlines you've heard before, peeling back the layers to explore the psychology and all the twists that made this case a true crime obsession.
What always gets me about this case is how it takes this picture of wealth and privilege, like the perfect facade, and then just totally shatters it.
Right. You think you know a story from the headlines, but
It's a family harboring dark secrets, reminding us that things are rarely as they seem. Never judge a book by its cover, right?
absolutely. It's 1989 picture at a lavish mansion in Beverly Hills. Our story starts with a gruesome discovery. Jose and Kitty Menendez, a successful Hollywood power couple, are found murdered in their home.
And the details, man, brutal doesn't even begin to describe it. Multiple shotgun blasts. It was a bloodbath, a crime of passion. The level of violence just sent shockwaves through everyone.
It's like something out of a movie, but tragically real. So you have this horrific crime, and then enter the sons, Lyle and Erik. But here's the thing. Instead of mourning their parents, they go on a massive spending spree. Designer clothes, luxury cars. They even bought a restaurant.
Yeah, it was like they were trying to build a new life overnight, a life fueled by their parents' money. It was the spending spree that really raised red flags for investigators.
It just doesn't fit the narrative of grieving sons, does it?
Exactly. It wasn't just the amount, but what they were buying. Like, Lyle buys a Rolex? Sure, it screams extravagance, but some have suggested it was deeper than that.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Like maybe a subconscious attempt to step into his father's shoes, embody his success, fill that void.
That's a really interesting psychological angle. So maybe it wasn't just pure greed, but a way to cope.
Possibly, but of course the prosecution saw it differently. To them, it was entitlement, plain and simple, cold-blooded greed. After all, Jose was a big-shot entertainment executive. They stood to inherit a fortune.
The classic motive wanting it all. But we're just getting started. The defense had a very different story to tell.
A story that would turn the whole case on its head. It wasn't about the money, they claim.
Buckle up, everyone. This is where it gets really interesting.
Up to this point, the prosecution's narrative was set, right? Greedy kids, inheritance open and shut. But then,
The defense throws a curveball.
a total bombshell. They claimed Lyle and Erik had endured years of abuse from their father.
We're not talking about a slap on the wrist here, are we? This is serious stuff.
Oh, absolutely. They alleged sustained emotional abuse, physical abuse, even sexual abuse. It painted this absolutely horrifying picture of what might have been happening behind those closed doors in that Beverly Hills mansion. Remember, this was the late 80s, right? Talking about this kind of stuff, especially in wealthy families, it was taboo.
It still is, in many ways. To bring that into the courtroom, that takes guts.
Huge gamble, either a Hail Mary to exonerate the brothers or it blows up in their faces completely.
The court of public opinion, right? Juries aren't immune to that. I'm curious, how did people react?
It was a total divide. Some were horrified, right? Their whole perception of the Menendez family shattered. They saw Lyle and Erik as victims pushed to the brink.
Makes you wonder what you'd believe if you were in that courtroom hearing it all firsthand.
Right. And then others, they just weren't buying it, thought it was a cold, calculated tactic to avoid responsibility, called it a manipulation.
Classic case of he said, she said, but with life or death stakes. What about the media? They must have had a field day.
Oh, totally. Wall-to-wall coverage, nonstop. It was like the OJ trial before the OJ trial, Became this national obsession. Suddenly, everyone's got an opinion on family dynamics, the justice system.
Abuse, wealth, privilege. It's all there.
Exactly. The trial became this mirror reflecting these huge societal issues.
But let's step back into the courtroom. How did the prosecution handle this? I mean, they had their narrative, and the defense just flipped the script.
They had a real challenge on their hands. They built their case on greed, and now they had to deal with this whole new dimension. Fear, self-defense, survival. It's a lot harder to convince a jury someone's a cold-blooded killer when they might also be a victim.
Did they try to disprove the abuse, or did they pivot entirely?
They tried. They called witnesses to paint Jose as a loving, if maybe strict father, tried to find holes in the brothers' stories, show premeditation, but the doubt was already there. Once that seed is planted.
It's hard to ignore, right? Even if you want to. So you've got this clash of narratives, a divided public, and a jury left to sort through it all.
Yeah.
Take us to the first trial. What were the key moments? What happened?
So 1993, the first trial, it was like this total clash of worlds. Greed, abuse, wealth, trauma, all playing out in the courtroom. And you had the brothers on the stand telling their stories and the jurors trying to make sense of it all. Could these rich kids actually be victims too?
It's like, what do you even believe, right? How do you reconcile those two things?
Exactly. And that's what made the outcome so crazy. Weeks of testimony, deliberations, and in the end, both juries, remember there were two, one for each brother, they were totally deadlocked. Couldn't agree on greed or self-defense. Hung jury.
Wow, both of them. That's kind of unheard of, right? Especially with all the attention on this case.
It tells you something about the abuse angle. The defense, they did their job, planted that seed of doubt.
So what happens then? Does it just end there?
Not quite. The prosecution had a choice, try again or walk away.
I bet that was a tough call.
Definitely. But they decided to go for round two.
Okay, so second trial. Same strategy, or did they switch things up?
They knew they had to change their approach. This time, they focused less on Jose, less on what he might or might not have done, and more on Lyle and Erik. Their actions after the murders, the spending, the alibis.
Trying to prove premeditation, that it wasn't just some heat-of-the-moment thing?
Exactly. They wanted to show calculation, coldness, play into that fear of entitled kids above the law.
Did it work? Did they get a conviction?
This time, yes. The jury found them both guilty of first-degree murder. Life in prison, no parole.
Wow. So that's a case closed.
Officially, yes. But even now, all these years later, people are still debating it. Documentaries, podcasts, everyone's got a theory. Was it greed? Was it abuse? Did they get a fair shake?
Some cases just stay with you, you know. The Menendez brothers, they make you think about family, about justice, about how much we really ever know what goes on behind closed doors.
For sure. It reminds you that sometimes the truth is messy, complicated. There are no easy answers.
Absolutely. And that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating. Thanks for joining us as we explore the twists and turns of the Menendez brothers case. It's a story that continues to spark debate and remind us that sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. We'll be back next time with another captivating case. Until then, keep those thinking caps on.